Hello and welcome to our first ever LSH Auto podcast. The topic of today's discussion is all about electric vehicles and how the technology is advancing at a rapid rate. Here's a discussion I, Frank Smith, Key Account Manager, had with James Cubitt, our General Manager, about electric vehicles. Everyone's going like, well, electricity can't be the mainstay because you've still got to produce it in some way with the Earth's resources.
Yeah.
So where do you see it going?
I mean, I was, in fairness, I had two interesting conversations, one of which was only a matter of 48 hours ago, and the other one was a gentleman who's actually in producing sort of chassis, and they help design for manufacturers and various other things. So they're doing a lot of work currently relating around hydrogen, and I think that's, if you were to Google it, you'll see quite a lot of sort of noise around hydrogen, and is hydrogen the next incarnation of motor vehicle transport and how vehicles are actually ran. I think it's got its merits. I mean, we've obviously looked at gas in a couple of different guises not that long ago, LPG and CNG, I think it is.
CNG, yeah.
And both of those never took off. There was benefits to mileage. Obviously, it is a little bit greener, but they never took off. Battery technology or electric technology is hugely taken the sort of the forefront. But let's be honest, you look back in history, and an electric vehicle isn't brand new. These things have been around in one guise or another for many, many years.
Yeah.
Is batteries or electric here to stay? I think it's certainly going towards that route, because there is a demand either from a consumer or a legislation point of view that we've got to move away from what we either currently produce or what we currently use as consumers. Does hydrogen have its place? I don't know. I don't know. I think it's interesting that we get to sort of play with the products, we get to use the products, both from what we do for a living, but equally as a consumer. And it's the manufacturers which are obviously looking at 5 years, 10 years in advance of where we are now in terms of, well, what's next? If we go back a few years ago, Betamax VHS, they both effectively did the same thing, but one, very quickly took over the other. And it wasn't that long before VHS went out and we went onto disc, and then
is this Blockbusters and
Blu-ray.
Netflix?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. and I think the people who are able to migrate that sort of challenge, the Blockbuster away from their traditional methods onto what's coming next, has the ability to sort of still be here in 10, 20 years' time. I mean, given the fact that obviously Mercedes invented the car and the commercial vehicle way back when. Their research and development program is bigger than quite a lot of people's sort of budgets, full stop. So their sort of portfolios, I guess they're looking out towards 2030 and beyond. They're probably already on with the likes of sort of hydrogen and maybe even something that we haven't even considered.
I mean, somebody I know has just invested a little bit of money in a company in China who are looking at smaller batteries. It's a bit like mobile phones. Can you remember them mobile phones when we first started? They were like huge, weren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, my wife got one because she was a teacher of IT, and she got one to show the kids, and they're all sitting with their little phones in their hands. You know what I mean? The smartphones, and they went, right, okay. Can you imagine, with this, and then trying to hold it right while you were in the car and driving? And I remember when I first started, having this massive mobile phone, and then someone in a car would pass me with the signal and whip your signal, and you lost it. Can you imagine that happening now? You couldn't, could you?
Well, it is a thought then. So my boy, who is quite keen on sort of, he thinks that way, and he's designed a few things, albeit out of Lego and Meccano and whatever else he does, origami type things. And he, so this was 2 nights ago, and he says, "Dad, I've been thinking." I said, "What's that?" He said wind turbines. I said, "Right, yeah." He said, and obviously we're currently moving to an electric platform. He says, your car's electric at the moment. And yeah, he says, well, how's about, could you create an electric vehicle platform? Bear in mind, this has come from an 11-year-old. An electric vehicle platform, and actually each of your wheels, your drive wheels, are effectively turbines, which then power your propulsion system. I said, well, in fact, that would give you, full energy. It'd completely sort of eradicate a lot of the problems. He says, exactly. So he says, so how do you do it? And that was an 11-year-old 2 nights ago.
Well, I mean, there is a company who are looking at putting solar panels on the outside of the car and trying to hide. I mean, you can imagine, can't you? Blinding everyone going down the motorway. But realistically, there must be a way of doing it, mustn't there?
Well, there are some ways, and I agree. It's you're then utilising or harnessing the natural elements of what the world sort of gives us. And okay, this is quite unusual, whether that was sort of personally sort of seeing right here, right now, and we've got a mixed sort of seasons in terms of the weather which it gives to us. However, you look at some of the other countries around the world, then could a roof out of solar panels actually be beneficial? You would kind of think that it's got its place. Are the cars which have got solar panels on? I believe there are some in R&D. You look at camper vans, for argument's sake. So the roof of a camper van actually has solar panels inbuilt into it. So when they're in a stationary position, they're drawing energy from the sun to power their utensils and things to which they want whilst they're on a campsite. So how far can you develop that technology that you might have a solar car? Who knows? Who knows?
Interesting.
But we look at where we are today. I think there's a lot of, if we look at Tesla, like them, love them, loathe them, whatever people's opinions are of them, what they have done is a complete disruptor to the industry. And actually what he did is to, in my own opinion, is to a lot of the motor manufacturers, it's a bit of a wake-up call. I think Tesla sort of stole a lot of the early sort of market adopters and actually made other people sort of stand up and think, and they've accelerated the program, not because they want to compete with Tesla, but actually there became a realization that actually now is a time where people are receptive to making that change, whereas probably sort of 10 years ago, it was too early. The technology was probably there, not quite as good as what it is today, but the infrastructure wasn't ready for that change. BP, for argument, I think it's BP, now is taking down some of their pumps on petrol stations and service stations and replacing it with charging infrastructures.
I know Shell are doing the same thing.
Shell are doing it. Yeah. Well, Shell are moving into home energy, so people are having to adapt their business. Back to Netflix and Blockbuster, people are adapting their business strategies depending upon where consumers are moving their purchases to.
Can you imagine if you could build a business recharging electric cars on the side of the road? You'd make a fortune, wouldn't you? Because people are definitely going to break down, aren't they?
People have. How successful it is, I couldn't give you any stats, but there are definitely businesses which are operating effectively rapid charge generator type operations that you've unfortunately ran out for whatever reason. Hey, let's be honest, people have done it in normal engine cars that they've chanced it, not quite got it right, whatever. They've broken down because they've run out of fuel. This is no different. It has happened, it will continue to happen, and people like that providing that service are going to be there. Where does it get to in terms of being able to sort of rapid charge, so it's actually in similar sort of guise of what people are used to going to the fuel station? Who knows? I mean, that's down to the technology that they can place in the batteries versus the technology of the actual charging infrastructures.
Can you imagine You just go with your little can back to there, juice it up and go and juice your car up. That just wouldn't happen, would it?
There was a study that I read, there was an article or a paper that I read, and I think it was the University of Stirling, but don't harm it. It was positive it was a Scottish university that have actually developed like an electric static fluid that actually goes into the battery system, so it basically recharges that part of the cell that they can do it within about 5 minutes. So these sort of clever elements which are coming out are continually sort of advancing the processes of what people sort of perceive probably as a drawback at the minute. I have to say, absolutely hand on heart, I have not missed going to a forecourt and standing there filling up, no matter if it was on the motorway, because you know the journey sort of dictates you're not going to make it, so you know you've got to fill up, you've got to pay the premium, okay, so we want to go out tomorrow, whatever. You don't have that, or very, very little. I've not experienced it in the 4,000 miles to which I've done, and it's all been sort of held with, you get home, it's very easy, you just plug it in, it's overnight, it's out the way, you can continue doing whatever you're doing, and in the morning it's done. And the other beauty of it is, you know, the weather that we've got at the moment, it's 28, 29, 30 degrees or whatever. I can simply press a button on an app, I can set the temperature to my car, so it can be nice and cool, or in winter, I can set it to a nice warm temperature. And if it's charging, that won't affect any of the range.
I mean, my solar, because I've got solar panels and a house battery.
Yeah.
It's amazing because every night I'm going in, I check my app. I'm a bit like you with your car, with my battery app, and every night I go in, it's 95% charged, and you know I'm now just giving loads of energy back to the grid all of the time because of the weather, which is awesome.
I never took the option when I was given an option. Do you want an EQV? I never particularly sort of looked at it in terms of, well, it's going to be an issue, it's going to be a hassle. What about this, that, and the other? And I have to say, I was truly sort of intrigued about. I mean, I've driven V classes, Vitos. You know, I've driven pretty much all the range, but I've never had a full electric car. So I was intrigued to actually understand what's this going to be like, and perhaps being given the car without a charging home charger, that you are in at the deep end, because you're like, oh,
I love that. Here's an electric car.
Yeah. And there was a bit of talk, you know, you won't make it to meetings, or your journey up to Stockport, you know, etc. And I suppose the point of what it made me consciously do was to consider, I've got to do this. How am I going to do it? And there is a degree that I then started thinking about what I did and how I did it. And that wasn't something I sort of contemplated when I actually took the car on. And actually it wasn't a way in which I thought I was going to ever drive a car. The part about being, I mean, I've never, you know, I can't say that I'm a big sort of road rage type individual anyway, but the calmness of driving that electric vehicle is something that I can't really describe. And whether or not that's because I've got to get to the meeting by this point, and maybe it's because you've got a bit more sort of planning to which you've sort of done on it, you just never seem to be in a rush. You just, it's like, it doesn't matter if people are going past you at 100 mile an hour, whatever people want to do. It's quite bizarre in the way in which it's changed probably my driving habits, really.
We hope you enjoyed our first ever podcast and would love you to get involved in the debate. You can do this by adding any comments or questions in the comments box, and we'll be on hand to answer any of these questions. Thank you for watching and listening, and we look forward to answering your queries.